Hello everyone, welcome again. This is Pooja Rawat and today we are going to start our social science history third chapter, ruling the countryside. And in this chapter basically we will read about British East India Company rule and their policies, how they start doing rules in India and what were their policies at that time, and how they were select the revenue and they collect the revenue from the India and from the other parts of the Indian states. First see this picture. In this picture Robert Clive accepting the Diwani of Bengal, Bihar and Orissa from the Mughal rulers in 1765. And this picture is a painting drawn by a painter. Our first topic is the company become the Diwan. On 12 August 1765, the Mughal Emperor appointed the East India Company as the Diwan of Bengal. The actual event most probably took place in Robert Clive's tent, with a few Englishmen and Indian as witness. We all know that first of all British East India start their rule फ्रॉम बंगाल. बंगाल ही वो प्लेस था जहाँ की उन्हें सबसे पहले दीवानी जागीरदारी मिली, जिससे कि वो वहाँ के रिवेन्यू और टैक्स को कलेक्ट कर सकते थे. जितना भी रिवेन्यू जितना भी टैक्स था सब पे उन्हीं का ही राइट होता था. बट इन द पेंटिंग अबाउ द इवेंट इज़ शोन एज अ मैजेस्टिक ओकेजन. ऐसा नहीं लग रहा है कि ये कोई सिंपल या कोई रूल करने वाला, वो बहुत ही मैजेस्टिक ओकेजन लग रहा है. टेकिंग प्लेस इन द ग्रांड सिटिंग एंड द पेंटर वॉज कमीशनड बाय सिविल Clive to record the memorable events in Clive's life. The grant of Diwani clearly was one such event in British imagination. As Diwani, the company became the chief financial administrator of the territory under the control. Now it had to think of administrating the land its control. Now it had to think of administrating the land and organizing its revenue resources. This had to be done in a way and that could yield enough revenue to meet the growing expense of the company. The trading company had also to ensure that it could buy the products it needed and sell what it wanted. Over the years, the company also learned that it had to move with some caution. Being an alien power, it needed to specify those who in the past had ruled the countryside and enjoyed authority and prestige. Those who had local power had to be controlled, but they could not be entirely eliminated. How was this to be done? In this chapter, we will see how the company come to colonize the countryside, organize revenue resources, redefine the rights of people, and produce the crops it wanted. These are the main topic of this chapter, and we will read these topics in very detail. First of all, we will read about revenue of the company. First of all, you can see this picture. This is a picture of a weekly market of Bengal. A weekly market in Murshidabad in Bengal. Peasants and artisans from rural areas regularly come to these weekly markets to sell their goods and buy what they needed. These markets were badly affected during times of economic crisis. The company had become the Diwan, but it still saw itself primarily as a trader. दीवान वो बने थे लेकिन वो खुद एक ट्रेडर बनकर ही यहाँ रहना चाहते थे, और उनकी जो मेन उनकी डिमांड थी वो थी कि इट वांटेड अ लार्ज रेवेन्यू इनकम but was unwillingly to set up any regular system of assessment and collection. The effort was to increase the revenue as much as it could and buy fine cotton and silk cloth as cheaply as possible. Within 5 years, the value of goods bought by the company in Bengal doubled. Before 1865, the company had purchased goods in India by importing gold and silver from Britain. Now the revenue collected in Bengal could finance the purchase of goods for export. Soon it was clear that the Bengal economy was facing a deep crisis. Artisans were deserting village since they were being forced and sell their goods to the company at a low price. Peasants were unable to pay the dues that were being demanded from them, and artisanal production was in decline, and agriculture cultivation showed signs of collapse. Then, in 1770, a terrible famine killed 10 million people in Bengal. About 1/3 of population was wiped out. The need to improve agriculture. This is the picture of Charles Cornwallis. Cornwallis was the Governor General of India when the permanent settlement was introduced. The need to improve agriculture means they want to improve the agriculture in India, and if the company was in ruins, could the company be certain of its revenue income? Most company officials began to feel that investment in land had to be encouraged and agriculture had to be improved. How was this to be done? After 2 decades of debate on the questions, the company finally introduced the permanent settlement in 1793. By the term of the settlement, the Rajas and Talukdars were recognized as Jamidar. They were asked to collect rent from the peasant and pay revenue to the company. The amount of the paid was fixed permanently, and that is it was not to be increased ever in future. It was felt that this would ensure a regular flow of revenue into the zamindars to invest the improving the land. Since the revenue demand of the state would not be increased, the zamindar would benefit from increased production from the land. The need to improve agriculture. British want to need to improve the agricultural process of India because they want to collect more revenue from the people of the country. So they want to improve the agriculture process, and so they were bringing new efforts and new crops in India, and so that they get the more revenue from the people. And in the first problem they were facing, that the permanent settlement, however, created problem. Company officials soon discovered that the zamindars were in fact not investing in the improvement of land. The revenue that had been fixed was so high that the zamindar found it difficult to pay. Anyone who failed to pay the revenue land his zamindari. Numerous zamindaris were sold off at auctions organized by the company. By the first decade of the 19th century, the situation changed. The price of the market rose and cultivation slowly expanded. This meant an increase in the income of zamindars but no gain from the company, since it could not increase the revenue demand that had been fixed permanently. Even then, the zamindars did not have an interest in improving the land. Some had lost their lands in the earlier years of the settlement. Others now saw the possibilities of earning without the trouble and risk of investment. As long as the zamindar could give out the land to tenants and get rent, they were not interested in improving the land. On the other hand, in the village, the cultivator found the system extremely oppressive. The rent he paid to the zamindars was high, and his right to the land was insecure. To pay the high, he had to often take a loan from the moneylender, and when he failed to pay the rent, he was evicted from the land to had cultivated in generation. So, this permanent settlement was not secure for the farmers and for the cultivators, because they were not feeling safe. And mahal, what is the meaning of mahal? This word here, in British revenue record, mahal is a revenue estate which may be a village or a group of village. A new system is devised. By the early 19th century, many of the company officials were convinced that the system of revenue had to be changed again. How could revenue is fixed permanently at a time when the company needed more money to meet its expense of administration and trade? In the northwestern province of Bengal Presidency, most of this area is now in Uttar Pradesh. An Englishman called Holt Magnus devised the new system, which came into effect in 1822. He felt that the village has an important social institution in northern India society and needed to be preserved. Under his directions, collectors went from village to village, inspecting the land, measuring the field, and recording the custom and right of different groups. The estimate revenue of each plot within a village was added up to calculate the revenue that each village or mahal had to pay. This demand was to revised periodically, not permanently fixed. The charge of collection the revenue and paying it to the company was given to the village headman rather than the zamindar. This system came to be known as the Mahalwari settlement. The Monroe system. Now we will read about the Monroe system. This is the picture of Thomas Monroe, गवर्नर ऑफ मद्रास 1819 से 26 तक थे और इन्होंने नया सिस्टम दिया, द मोनरो सिस्टम. इन द ब्रिटिश टेरिटरी इन द साउथ देयर वाज अ सिमिलर मूव away from the ideas of permanent settlement. The new system that was devised came to be known as the Rayatwar or Rayatwari. It was tried on a small scale by Captain Alexander Reid in some of the areas that were taken over by the company after the wars within Tipu Sultan. Subsequently, development by Thomas Monroe, this system was gradually extended all over South India. Reid and Monroe left that in the south there were no traditional zamindars. The settlement, they argued, had to be made directly with the cultivators, यानी कि रैयत्स, who had tilled the land for generations. Their field had to be carefully and separately surveyed before the revenue assessment was made. Monroe thought that the British should act as paternal father figure, protection the Rayyat under their charge. All was not well. Within a few years after the new system were imposed, it was clear that all was not well with them. Driven by the desire to increase the income from land, revenue officials fixed too high a revenue demand. Peasants were unable to pay. Rayyat fled the countryside and villages became deserted in many regions. Optimistic officials had imagined that the new system would transform the peasant into rich, enterprising farms, but this did not happen. Crop for Europe. The British also realized that the countryside could not only yield revenue, it could also grow the crops that Europe required. And now they want to grow the new crop in the countryside. And by the late 18th century, the company was trying its best to expand the cultivation of opium and indigo. They want to grow opium and indigo. In the century and a half that followed, the British pursued or forced cultivators in various parts of India to produce their crops: jute in Bengal, tea in Assam, sugarcane in United Province, and they want to grow some other crops that Europe required. But the late 18th century, the company was trying its best to expand the cultivation of opium and indigo. और वो अपनी मनपसंद की क्रॉप्स जो है वो यहाँ पे उगवाना चाहते थे. वीट इन पंजाब, कॉटन इन महाराष्ट्र, इन पंजाब, राइस इन मद्रास, सो दैट दे कैन गेट मोर रिवेन्यू. और इन क्रॉप्स की डिमांड जो थी वो यूरोप में ज़्यादा थी, सो दैट दे वांट टू इंक्रीज द कल्टिवेशन ऑफ दीज क्रॉप्स, स्पेशली दीज क्रॉप्स इन इंडिया. हाउ वाज दिस डन? The British used a variety of methods to expand the cultivation of crops that they needed. Let us take a closer look to the story of one such crop, one such method of production. Does color have a history? Colors की भी बहुत history थी इंडिया में. These are two pictures, figure 5 and figure 6. Figure 5, a kalamkari print 20th century in India, and figure 6, a Morris cotton print late 19th century England. These are the prints जो थी इंडिया में फेमस थे और इंग्लैंड में फेमस थे कपड़ों की पेंटिंग्स के लिए. Figure 5 and 6 are two images of cotton prints. The image on the figure 5 show a kalamkari print created by weavers of Andhra Pradesh in India, and on the right is a floral cotton print designed and produced by William Morris, a famous poet and artist of 19th century Britain. There is one thing common in the two prints. Both use a rich blue color, commonly called indigo. Do you know how this color was produced? The blue that you see in this print was produced from a plant called indigo, and it is likely that the blue dye used in the Morris printed in 19th century Britain was manufactured from indigo plant cultivated in India. For India was the biggest supplier of indigo in the world at that time. But indigo एक ऐसी क्रॉप थी जो कि उगाई जाए अगर तो पूरा का पूरा फील्ड भी ख़राब कर देती थी, और ब्लू कलर की डिमांड बहुत ज़्यादा थी क्योंकि ब्लू कलर दोनों तरह के कपड़ों की पेंटिंग में यूज़ हो रहे हैं. सो ब्लू कलर इंडिगो में जो कल्टिवेटर्स थे उनको जो उनकी खाने के लिए या जो उनकी फूड क्रॉप्स उगाने की बजाय उनको कमर्शियल क्रॉप उगाने के लिए ज़्यादा उनको फोर्स किया जाता था. And why the demand for indigo crops? The indigo plant grew primarily in the tropics. By the 13th century, Indian indigo was being used by cloth manufacturers in Italy, France and Britain to dye clothes. However, only small amount of Indian indigo reached the Europe market and its price was very high. European clothes manufactured therefore had to develop on other plants called woad and make violet and blue dye. Being a plant to the temperate zones, wood was more easily available in Europe. It was grown in northern Italy, southern France and in parts of Germany and Britain. Worried by the competition from indigo, woods produced in Europe pressurized their government to ban the import of indigo. Clothes dyer, however, preferred indigo as a dye. Indigo produced a rich blue color, whereas the dye from wood was pale and dull. By the 17th century, European cloth producers persuaded their governments to relax the ban on indigo import. The French began cultivating indigo in St. Domingue in the Caribbean island, the Portuguese in Brazil, the English in Jamaica, and the Spanish in Venezuela. Indigo plantation also came up in many parts in Northern America. By the end of the 18th century, the demand from indigo grew further. Britain began to industrialize, and its cotton production expanded dramatically, creating an enormous new demand for cloth dye. While the demand for indigo increased, its existing supplies from the West Indies and American collapsed for a variety of reasons. Between 1783 and 1789, the production of indigo in the world fell by half. Cloth dyer in Britain was desperately looked for new source of indigo supply. From where could this indigo be produced? Britain turns to India. Faced with the rising demand for indigo in Europe, अब पूरी दुनिया में इंडिगो की डिमांड बढ़ रही थी तो सबने इंडिया की तरफ ही देखा. Faced with the rising demand for indigo in Europe, the company in India looked for a way to expand the areas under indigo cultivation. कंपनी चाहती थी कि इंडिगो कल्टिवेशन के एरियाज़ को बढ़ाया जाए. In figure 7, the slave रिवोल्ट इन सेंट डोमिंगो अगस्त 1791. ये स्लेव्स ने रिवोल्ट किया हुआ है, जो गुलामों ने जो रिवोल्ट किया हुआ है वो शो हो रहा है. एंड इन द 18th century, French planters produced indigo and sugar in the French colony of Saint Domingo in the Caribbean island. The African slave who worked on the plantation rose in rebellion in 1791, burning the plantation and killing their rich planters. In 1792, French abolished slavery in the French colonies. These events led to the collapse of the indigo plantation on the Caribbean island. This is the picture, and इस पिक्चर में शो हो रहा है किस तरह से स्लेव्स ने एक तरह से रिबेल कर दिया था. Britain turns to India, and from the last decades of the 18th century, indigo cultivation in Bengal expanded rapidly. The Bengal indigo came to dominate the world's market in 1788. Only about 30% of the indigo imported into Britain was from India. By 1810, the proportion had gone up to 95% as the indigo trade grew. Commercial agents and officials of the company began investing the indigo production. Over the year, many company officials left their job to look after their indigo business. Attracted by the prospect of high profits, numerous Scotsmen and Englishmen came to India and became planters. Those who had no money to produce indigo could get loans from the company and bank that were coming up at the end. How was indigo cultivated? There were two main systems of indigo cultivation, Niz and Rayati. Within the system of Niz cultivation, the planter produced indigo in land and directly controlled. He either bought the land or rented it from the zamindars and produced indigo by directly employing higher laborers. The problem with niche cultivation, the planters found it difficult to expand the area under niche cultivation. Indigo could be cultivated only on fertile land, and these were all already densely populated. Only small plots scattered over the landscape could be acquired. Planters needed large areas in compact blocks and cultivate indigo in plantation. Where could they get such land from? They attempted to lease in the land around the indigo factory. They evict the peasant from the area, but this always led to the conflict and tension. Nor was labor easy to mobilize. A large plantation required a vast number of hands to operate, and labor was needed precisely to a time when peasants were usually busy with their rice cultivation. Niche cultivation on a large scale also required many plug and plugs. 1 bigha of indigo cultivation required 2 plugs. This means that a planter with 1000 bighas would needed 2000 plugs. Investing on purchase and maintenance of plugs was a big problem, nor could supplies be easily got from the peasants since their plugs and bullocks were busy on their rice field, again exactly at the time that the indigo planters needed them. Till the late 19th century, planters were therefore reluctant to expand the areas under niche cultivation. Less than 20% of the land producing indigo was under this system, and rest was under the alternative mode of cultivation, the Rayati system. Indigo on the land of Rayats. Under the Rayati system, the planters forced the Rayats to sign a contract, an arrangement satta. At times, they pressurized the villages headmen to sign the contract on behalf of the Rayats. Those who signed the contract could cash advance from the planters as low rates of interest to produce indigo, but the loan committed the Rayat to cultivating indigo on at least 25% of the area under his holding. The planters provided the seeds and the drill while the cultivators prepared the soil, sowed the seed, and looked after the crop. This figure 8, worker harvesting indigo. Figure 9, the indigo plants being brought from field to the factory. And how was indigo produced? Figure 10, an indigo factory located near indigo fields, painting by William Simpson. Figure 11, women usually carry the indigo plant to the wards. Figure 12, a wart beater. The indigo worker here is standing with the paddle that was used to stir the solution of the vat. These workers had to remain in waist deep water for overnight, however, to beat the indigo solution. Figure 13, the indigo is ready for sale. Vat means a fermenting or storage vessel. When the crop was delivered to the planter after the harvest, a new loan was given to the Rayat and the cycle started all over again. Peasants who were initially tempted by the loan soon realized how harsh the system was. The price they got for the indigo they produced was very low, and the cycle of loan never ended. And there were other problems too. The planter usually insisted that indigo be cultivated on the best soil, in which peasants referred to cultivate rice. Indigo, moreover, had deep roots and it exhausted the soil rapidly. After an indigo harvest, the land could not be sown with rice. So ब्रिटिश ईस्ट इंडिया कंपनी इंडियन कल्टिवेटर से यही चाहती थी कि वो अपनी फील्ड्स में राइस या वीट की क्रॉप्स ग्रो करने के बजाय वो इंडिगो की कल्टीवेशन करें। बट इंडिगो की कल्टीवेशन से पूरे की पूरी जो लैंड थी वो बर्बाद हो जाती थी, और उसके बाद जो फार्मर्स थे वो लैंड जो है वो अपने राइस कल्टीवेशन के लिए यूज़ नहीं कर पाते थे, और राइस अगर वो नहीं उगाएंगे तो वो खाएंगे क्या। कल्टीवेटर्स के लिए और फार्मर्स के लिए बहुत बड़ी प्रॉब्लम क्रिएट हो जाती थी। और जहाँ तक ब्रिटिश ईस्ट इंडिया कंपनी के ऊपर बात आती थी, तो वो फार्मर्स को फोर्स करते थे कि हम तुम्हें पैसे देंगे, लोन देंगे, जिस मनी के बेस पे आप लोग अपना इंडिगो ग्रो करेंगे, और फिर उसके बाद वो हमें वो कर्ज़ भी वापस देंगे, और तुम्हारे जो इंडिगो की जो क्रॉप होगी वो हम ही खरीदेंगे। बट जितना वो उनको पैसा देते थे, जितना मनी उनको प्रोवाइड कराते थे, वो उनके लिए उससे जो है कल्टीवेटर्स को, फार्मर्स को कुछ भी प्रॉफिट नहीं होता था, बल्कि उनके लैंड जो है वो पूरी तरह से डिस्ट्रॉय हो जाती थी, और वो दोबारा से राइस कल्टीवेशन या फूड क्रॉप कल्टीवेशन के लायक नहीं रहती थी, क्योंकि इंडिगो की जो रूट्स होती है वो बहुत गहरी चली जाती थी और वो वापस ज़मीन को अच्छी नहीं रखती थी। सो